What's up, everybody? We're out here at Centennial. Today we're going to be doing a review of the Salsa Moraine Q's build. Personally, I think this is one of the best bang for your buck e-bikes you can get on the market today. Right now, pretty sure these are available for about $3,000. You get some base model RockShox stuff, some Shimano Q's 10-speed, WTB wheels, and some 4-piston Shimano brakes. Me personally, this build stays. So I'm pretty good. As a pretty hard enduro rider, the WTB wheels do get pretty beat up, but some thicker tires, some higher pressures they'll do. Today we're just going to go through the characteristics of this bike, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, but over all the negatives, still think it's a pretty good deal. Alright, so geometry numbers are pretty average for nowadays. I almost think it's pretty moderate besides the reach. It's about a 64-degree head tube, 435 chainstay in a medium, and then the reach is a 475 for a medium, which is pretty much a large for most brands. And for some reason, it doesn't feel too crazy. I think they did something with the seat tube angle or something, but sitting down does not feel too stretched out. You can see that I have freaking Dakota Norton up in here. That's just how I ride my bikes personally, and on an e-bike it has a lot of confidence. But for a 475 reach, it doesn't feel too stretched out, and it puts you in a pretty good strong position for me personally. Maybe it could be a little shorter, have a little more stack, but the stack honestly isn't too bad on this bike. It just doesn't come with a very high rise bar. Alright, let's get in the riding, and I'll explain some of the sensations I get on the trail. No major issues. Woo! Very stable. Yeah. Woo! Oh my God. I am lucky. It's a little creaky from stuff moving around, but it doesn't feel too loose riding it. It just generates a lot of grip. The riding position on this bike really gives me a lot of confidence. It almost makes me want to size up on some bikes, but every time I do on another bike, I haven't enjoyed it as much. For a large or a medium, the reach is very long, but the chainstays are about normal. And I would have thought that would have made some imbalance. But with the battery and the motor having all that weight, still grips pretty well everywhere. Could have a little more bias in the front, but with a 64-degree head angle, it's not like you're washing. And you can see I'm getting away with all this stack, not having much of an issue. And the suspension is also eating that stuff up pretty good. It never feels too unpredictable. but it just does give quite a bit of feedback now and then, which I don't expect it to feel crazy buttery. It's like a 150 in the rear, 160 front. Might be a little less in the rear. I'll put up some numbers, but it's not a VPP or a horse link. It's not. It honestly might be a horse link. I'm not sure, but it's not something that's super supple. All right, for motor battery combo, I personally don't like to have too much power. I'm just chilling in the middle mode right now. It's got the eco, the middle, and turbo, and I'm just cruising. Barely have to put down any watts. Not ripping up the turns, but I'm not breathing heavy, and can click it up to the turbo and just chill. Compared to a Bosch motor, a freaking Avinox, it's not much, but for the price, and if you're not too worried about having 1,000-watt like crazy torque, this will do everything. And it's been very hard for me to kill the battery out here. I bet in a place with more elevation it would be easier, but out here it's really no issue. You could ride 20 plus miles no problem, even without having to stay on eco the whole time. I'd almost compare it to a little bit of a souped up half power. Still weighs quite a bit, but that's what you're gonna get for a $3,000 bike, $3,000 e-bike. It's gonna weigh a little bit. It's full aluminum, Shimano keys, some open bath fork. Like, it's not gonna be ultra lightweight. But that doesn't make it not maneuverable on the trail. It is worth to say that the Zua is no longer supported by Porsche, so that could be an issue. But still, $3,000. I'll see y'all. Very good. It eats so much grip. Pretty grippy today. I think that is the strength of this bike, how it can just find that grip in the turns, compared to some e-bikes like the Vala that I've ridden. It just feels a little more locked in on them turns. The Vala feels like you're kind of balancing, pushing the front and the rear. This is just good position, very, very centered, which I didn't really expect from this sort of a chainstay, but it really does provide quite a lot of front end grip. I think just all the flex, it can feel a little weird in some places, but on tight, kind of looser, not fully rough, but just blown out terrain, can really track and find the grip on that. On other bikes you'd possibly getting a little bit tossed around. Drop it in, a little bit gnarly of a trail. Got this huge drop right here. Flat pretty good. You can't leave it flat like do it on some bikes. Really good. Grip in here. Doesn't get too scared. Right there. Usually that's a good compression. Oh my god. Popped out real good there. Pull the gap. Oh. Yeah. That trail was called Chunky, and it's probably the steepest, fastest, and most high impact trail at Centennial, and it really shows the strengths and weaknesses of this bike. And some of that, there's a section with that high impact drop and some very undulating rock gardens, but there's also some pretty small, sharp rock gardens where your suspension isn't doing much, but the frame is conforming to all of that and getting out of the way so you can track properly. And I think that's where this bike really shines. Maybe not as much. Oh, thank y'all. Maybe not as much in the big hits. I definitely felt the bottom out a couple of times in there. Wasn't overly dramatic, but definitely feel it compared to a normal bike. But in some of those awkward rock gardens, it can really hold a lot of grip and not throw you offline, which is pretty impressive for this bike. And it kind of balances out the negatives that you would feel from this lower level suspension package. If you're looking for a pretty comfortable bike, you're not necessarily sending off bike park drops and massive jumps, still plenty do for some good, like, raw backcountry riding. I would definitely say it handles steep terrain all right. The brakes definitely could have more power, but it's a $3,000 bike, guys. It's not gonna have SRAM Mavens, not gonna have RockShox ultimate suspension. It's gonna do what it can with these lower level parts, and I think it does quite well. Go through the pros of this bike, in my opinion. It's cheap, for one, obviously. It's comfortable and very grippy. Can generate grip in a lot of areas. That's my main thing with it. It's also a very good riding position, especially for someone that's maybe a little bit on the taller side for a medium, like myself. Someone that's 5'9" to 5'11" would really love this medium. Gives you a little more room to move around this heavy bike. And I'd also say another pro is the cornering and balance. It's just always in a good spot. Another pro would probably be how durable it is for the price. It's just pretty bulletproof. The suspension hasn't had any problems. These wheels are pretty strong. You don't let them hit any rocks. But if you're just keeping the tires aired up a decent amount, they'll hold. They're definitely no DT Swiss FR or anything like that, but for somebody that usually causes a lot of damage on the wheels, I've been able to put a couple dents in them, but that's from me being irresponsible with air pressure. So if you're okay with running a couple of extra PSI, nothing wrong with these wheels. I think my last pro for this bike is something that gets overlooked a lot nowadays, and that's just the simplicity of this bike. It's a 10-speed drivetrain, so there's a little more room for error messing with things. It's not as finicky. It's just a pretty basic geometry, full 29, all mountain e-bike without any fancy gadgets or anything. It's not gonna do anything weird. It's simple. Alright, we're gonna ride something a little bit out of this bike's comfort zone, in my opinion. A trail called Red Rum. It's a pretty high speed jump trail. It's got a gnarly rock garden right here. Real steep. And then we get into this stuff. Real high speed, real high impact. Whoa! This trail is pretty destroyed. It doesn't get maintained very often, but oh my gosh, that's a ride. That's where this bike raised a little bit. It's got a little bit more forgiveness than an average bike of just suspension quality and travel. Oh yeah. And I handled that pretty well too. That top rock garden is pretty scary a lot of the time. It's very steep. Goes straight into that rock berm of a wall, and it handles it pretty good. Just finds those little pockets of grip, conforms to the terrain. It's very different compared to my Bronson, where we got that stiff carbon frame and the super strong DT Swiss FR wheels. But it's just different. It's not necessarily worse or better, but in some areas it really does shine. Alright, let's get into the cons of this bike now. Firstly, I think the biggest thing most people will be scared of is that Fazua is no longer supported by Porsche, and that's an issue. But with how reliable these motors are, they're definitely not the most expensive or nicest motors, but the only issue we've ever had is the wire ripping out of the controller. That is mostly because it was a rental bike and it gets reefed on, but it's had no actual internal problems and very resilient to a lot of abuse. Another con, also can be a pro in a lot of scenarios, is the flex. The linkage kind of moving around. You'll hear in the videos it goes little, and that's just kind of it binding up under load, which from a kind of lower quality frame isn't unheard of, but it doesn't really affect the ride feel besides getting that flex, that it doesn't feel like it's gonna fall apart on you. In some scenarios it feels like you might have less pop or less drive out of a turn, maybe a little less precision, but we know that's something some brands like to engineer to have that more forgiveness. That's something Commensal's huge on, and some other brands. So I wouldn't say a flexi frame is a bad thing, and I don't think it makes it any less durable either. I've sent it off some pretty big stuff in my opinion, and it'll bottom out the shock, but it won't crack the frame, so that's my take on that. Another con is obviously the rear suspension layout. As I've said, feels pretty supportive when you're climbing and riding stuff like this, but once you start hitting some good G-outs or going deep on landings, you'll definitely feel that shock blow through the travel. It almost feels like the first half of the travel is more supported than the end stroke, which is a weird sensation. But I'm also used to having some pretty good suspension layouts in the rear. I wouldn't say the pedal kickback is an issue on this though. Another con is that this frame might be a little weird for smaller riders under 5'6". Their small frame is a 455 reach, which is almost the exact same as my Bronson. That is a medium that I love the sizing on. This medium is quite long, so if you're not on the upper end of the medium, it's going to be a little weird. And the large is something like a 4.95, something like that, and that's pretty absurd. But some people really like that feeling. I've been enjoying this longer reach. I think for me personally, what has helped balance it out is getting all the stem spacers under the stem, bringing that reach in a little, and bringing that stack up. Me personally, I like to run a really high stack. It adds a lot of more comfort to the ride and a stronger body position, especially on a larger bike, and hasn't felt really crazy to me. I'm gonna do a quick demonstration of the flex on this bike. Hear that? A little bit play in the linkage, like it's not the most solid thing. That rear wheel is quite a bit of wiggle, but it doesn't feel like it's falling apart on the trail. So who do I think this bike suits? I'd say probably somebody that wants a little more comfort than pure aggression out of their e-bike. For me personally, it's been a pretty nice rig to take out every couple weeks. This isn't my personal bike. It is my mom's bike, but it's very fun to get out on it maybe once a week, every couple weeks. Get some good downhill riding in without have to kill yourself in the climbs. Just a really cheap option to do some good enduro riding. Probably isn't the best for huge jumps or huge drops, but for terrain like this where it's more loose, tight, and not as big impact, it really does everything pretty well. So that's what I have to say about the cheap but powerful Salsa Moraine Qs from Get Your Own at Smokehouse Cycles. Yep. Up lap. Then we're gonna do Captain Fantastic. Pretty tight, turny trail. Some rock sections. Oh yeah. A little bit loud, but it's conforming. I think some e-bikes might be going too long in the chain today or too radical in geometry, and this bike's just pretty simple, and it's longer reach and it's more moderate geometry. Gives a pretty playful feel while still having a lot of stability and confidence that's added from the added weight down low. I think the one thing I would rather have on a bike like this is probably a mullet rear wheel, just to give it that little bit more of agility. Me personally, I like that mullet. I got short legs. I buzz my butt on the 29er quite a bit. That's just because I'm used to a mullet though. And if you're used to a 29er, this is still very fun and maneuverable. Alright, so this has been my thoughts on the Salsa. And it's a great bike, great budget, enduro-esque e-bike. Very fun. Originally, when I first hopped on this bike, I didn't think I would enjoy it, and it seemed a little lackluster to me. But over time, as I've gave it a little more time to grow and let myself set up this bike to my preferences, it's really started to shine in some areas, and it's been pretty fun. So I really like to just take my time out here riding, give y'all something to think about and some entertainment. So y'all pick my brain in the comments, and please subscribe and like if you enjoyed this, it's kind of just me goofing, but I would appreciate support. So thank y'all for watching through this whole thing. I'll catch y'all later with some more bike nerd stuff. Peace.